Here are the team's Power 5 college football programs with the longest drought since they had a first-round pick. I'll go from the most recent, but it's not recent. 2009, Virginia, Maryland, Texas Tech, Michael Crabtree, Kansas State, Josh Freeman, the quarterback, drafted by Tampa Bay.
That's part of the Big 12's problem is they're not producing great quarterbacks. I mean, beyond Murray and Mayfield and that kind of run right there, I mean, who has anybody really put in the league?
Some of them have put up huge numbers
as first-round talents.
Picks, yes.
I mean, Brock Purdy's a middle to late-round guy ultimately. Baylor doesn't have a guy that's eligible. Tech, Mahomes obviously, but Mahomes, Mayfield, that's like 4 or 5 years ago now at this point. I mean, we're getting kind of in that 5-year period. So that's, Texas hasn't, Ellinger went in the draft and he's with the Colts, but he wasn't a first round pick and just so on down the line. Will Grier wasn't a first-round pick for West Virginia, although he was a really good quarterback. Skylar Thompson obviously wasn't going to be a first-round quarterback, so I think that's part of what's played them because when they were getting some guys in the first round, it was an Oklahoma quarterback or somebody along those lines.
Yeah, Mahomes obviously broke that drought of Michael Crabtree as well. Arkansas, Arizona, North Carolina State, these are some of the teams that have had a drought. Iowa State, 1973.
Was their last first-round pick?
George Edmondson, a running back who was drafted by the Houston Oilers.
I'm curious how Will McDonald's viewed. Obviously a long way out now. He decided to come back. I don't have any clue on what his NFL outlook would be, but he's definitely a draft guy and probably a relatively high, I would think, especially if he has a follow-up year that's pretty good. But, yeah, that's not ultimately terribly surprising. I think with the lack of emphasis on running backs, and that's really what they've specialized in, and they've had really good tight ends and some good receivers, but nobody that's been, just blow your socks off. That's a first-round draft pick right there. Breece Hall probably – coulda, shoulda, woulda, but obviously the NFL had other ideas last night.
And, as good as Iowa State, well, again, we say that. They really have been erratic, and they've had this nice little, at least, consistency now with Matt Campbell, but it's been a long time, since 1973 for them to have a first-round pick, and now another year goes by.
Well, let's go out to the Big 12. Do you have, the Big 12 droughts, or do you have
I was looking at this story, and now I got a little problem with it. Kansas State, 2009. I would think...
Texas, we know, has been a decade because people posted that left and right last night.
And I saw somebody who sent me somebody sent me a note. The last offensive player drafted in the first round by Texas was 2006. Has it really been that long?
Drafted in the first round?
Offensive player, yes.
I guess so. Yeah, I don't know that off the top of my head. I don't have that memorized exactly, but I wouldn't be shocked by that. They have brought in a lot of really great players, but it just hasn't necessarily, and they put a lot of guys in the pros, but it hasn't, right before Art Browse got fired, they were closing out that 2016 class or whatever, and I remember there was this big battle for Patrick Hudson, the offensive lineman from Silsbee. He would sign with Baylor, even though Texas was hot on his trail. Ultimately, when Browse got fired, Hudson left Baylor. He went to Texas, along with a couple of other Baylor guys. Ended up medically retiring, and then not really ended up playing all that much, even though he was like a high 4 or 5-star guy. So, they've had some bad luck, and yes, some of it just hasn't translated. But going back to that time period, Charlie Strong, Tom Herman, kind of the whole area. I just remember hearing all about DeMarvin Overshown's not eligible yet, so he's a guy that we can be talking about next year. But
I thought he actually made the comment he was coming back, though. I wonder.
That's what I'm saying. I don't mean by eligible. What I meant was he's not in the draft yet.
Yes,
but
right.
We'll see with him, but that class of B.J. Foster's not even on the team anymore. You know what I mean? And those were their really highly rated guys. So maybe some of that from 4 or 5 years ago will translate starting next year or something. You'd have to think Bijan Robinson, if he can have a really strong year, that maybe he would be a first-round pick if he leaves as a junior. But then again, we see the running back position is not highly valued right now, so that's not a guarantee necessarily, and he certainly hadn't put up the numbers that Breece Hall put up, although I know it's not about the numbers, it's about the special athlete that Bijan is. But Yeah, I mean, I could believe that. Oklahoma's really done the supplying in many cases, and then you've had your text with a Patrick Mahomes and things like that. But it's been few and far between.
Jordan Brooks, linebacker from Tech 2 years ago.
Tech's actually been pulling their
picked
pulling
by
the weight.
Seattle. Mahomes in 17. Before that, it was Michael Crabtree. Kansas State, I mentioned Josh Freeman. Terrence Newman before that, back in 2003.
And they'll have Deuce Vaughn next year. I don't know. He's a first-round pick, obviously, though. But, he'll definitely at least get them on the draft board for
Kansas,
sure.
Aqib Talib back in 2008. Of course, that was the team. They had that great team, that run with Mark Mangino.
But this is all like back in the Big 12's glory days of the 2000s. I mean, it's basically what this is for the most part.
Yep. So
that's as big of a problem. I mean, the money thing is the biggest problem they're facing, just in terms of TV rights and all that needing to get figured out. But when you talk about the gap in money, that's one thing. The gap in talent, though, that is another massive, I don't know if problem's the word, but an issue that's facing them is they are not putting guys in the top of the rounds or in the top round of the NFL draft on a regular basis. I mean, 2 years, not a single pick, I think is. You can explain some of it away. Hey, it's a younger league maybe or whatever, but then it starts to just sound like excuses. They just, bottom line, they don't have the same type of elite quarterbacks like they had with Mahomes and Murray and Mayfield. Your two big dogs are not producing as much as you would like them to. Matter of fact, they've both been shut out just like everybody else the last 2 years. So all that does add up, and you've only got 10 teams too. Like, that's one thing when you compare them. SEC's got 14 teams, Big Ten's got 14 teams, Pac-12's got 2 more teams, ACC's got 4 more teams. So that kind of, I mean, they could all be at 10 and they would still get 0, and everybody else would still have 2 or 3. But having 4 less teams than most people doesn't help your chances anymore either.
When Texas made their run under Mac Brown, his first year, of course, he also had a Heisman Trophy winning running back in Ricky Williams. He was a first-round pick in 99. They had a first-round pick, 2 of them in 2001, Leonard Davis and Casey Hampton. This is when they start now. Couldn't beat Oklahoma yet, but they were getting there. Mike Williams and Quentin Jammer in 2002. 2004, the team that won the national title in 3, Roy Williams and Marcus Tubbs. No, that's 2006, 5 won the national. Roy Williams, Marcus Tubbs, 2004. Cedric Benson and Derek Johnson in 2005.
Yeah.
Vince Young, Michael Huff, 2006. Year after year with 2 of them. Michael Griffin, Aaron Ross in 2007. Now, if you look at
they were really DBU and then had an argument for that. LSU's kind of taken that now, and maybe even Ohio State to a level, but yeah, Mac was producing first rounders. There's no doubt, and Oklahoma was back then too.
Well, and I've got theirs as well. I'll get to them because it could take a while with what they've done.
But yeah, I mean that's the thing is that there's been whatever reasons you want to point to the money becoming so much bigger in other conferences that they've started to separate in that way. Whether it's the fact that. One thing that did happen was Mac Brown handed over some Texas quarterbacks to some other schools. I know Ohio State's feasting on Texas guys right now. I mean, Garrett Wilson, you'd hope he was playing in the Big 12, but he's not. He's playing in the Big 10, and A&M beating the SEC. That's pulled out a lot of the Texas guys that would otherwise maybe be Big 12 players as well. So it's self-inflicted. It's also out of their control. But bottom line is that there's a drought and it's not good. And I don't know who and maybe there's somebody I'm just not thinking of for next year that's an automatic type of a guy. But it's that gap's growing. I would think so, but then again, at running back, I mean, who the heck really knows? But he's a special player, obviously, and a special mold and skills and all that. So I could see him being somebody that, does become a first-round pick. That wouldn't be surprising. I think, Xavier Worthy after that, the year after, since he's only going to be a sophomore this year, you would think that he could probably be in that conversation. So they've got a couple of guys in the pipeline that will, unless they bolt in the next year, will be Big 12 first-round type picks. But there's not a ton of. There's a lot of good second, third, fourth round players. There's not a bunch of top first round guys.
OU had 2 and 20 with CeeDee Lamb and Kenneth Murray. Kyler Murray in 19, Marquise Brown in 19, who was traded to Kyler Murray's team last night. Mayfield in 18 was the first overall pick.
By the way, that was cool the way the Cardinals did that.
No, it was.
They brought him in and all secretive and had him show up at the draft party. And I don't think Cardinals fans knew what to think at first because they were there for the draft. They were there for a pick. And then the Cardinals were like, by the way, we're not picking tonight. But here's Hollywood Brown. Yeah. And so that was fun.
Lamar Jackson, not real thrilled, but he kind of knew that. All right, so Mayfield in 18, Marquise Brown and Kyler Murray in 19, and Kenneth Murray and CeeDee Lamb in 20. Prior to that, it was 5 years, which is still not, number one pick. Lane Johnson has had a long career in the NFL as an offensive lineman with the Eagles, 13. 4 in 2010. Bradford McCoy, Trent Williams, and Jermaine Gresham.
Yeah, that was a good draft.
So, the team that won the national title was 2000. They actually did not have a first-round pick. That was a team that was just kind of different. And then they started to get Adrian Peterson, Roy Williams, Tommy Harris, among some others over the next few years.
Yeah, so, they did their fair share and they pulled a lot of their weight. But these last couple of years, not anything since, what, CD, you said, or Kenneth Murray? So, yeah, it's been a couple of years for them. And maybe at one point in time you would have thought like a Kennedy Brooks, but then again, like with the running backs nowadays, and he was okay, I guess, towards the end. So not surprised that he didn't ultimately end up a first rounder. I just thought maybe a couple years ago at one point, like maybe they could turn him into this, but all hell broke loose with Riley and everything else. So, I don't know who's next in line for them. It probably would have been Caleb Williams, right? And maybe an offensive lineman I'm not thinking of at the moment, but yeah, the droughts for everybody. Need everybody to kind of up their game here.
In 2020, the Big 12 had 5 first-round picks, so it's not like it's been 2 years, but they had 5: CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Reagor, Kenneth Murray, Jordan Brooks, and Jeff Gladney. Gladney from TCU, all came out of the first round. Georgia had 5 last night by themselves. Pretty amazing.
Defense.
Also, 12 of the first 32 picks from the Southeastern Conference, which was not a surprise at all.
No, and I don't know how you close that talent gap either. I mean, they're never going to reach the SEC level or even probably the Big Ten level. Again, you've got less teams, so it's asking everybody to have like an extra guy than they would normally have. When everybody's got 0, you're asking them for 1. That's a lot to ask. So I don't really know how. I think maybe with guys like Dave Aranda, you'll start to see him once he's got more of the roots growing. We'll see a player emerge that could turn into a first round type of guy, probably on the defensive side. Like an Apu Ika maybe, if he can maximize his potential. But yeah, like there's a talent gap, and there's no other way to explain it. And I don't know if that's something that becomes more worrisome with NIL, or if that's something that maybe NIL can help you with. But, like West Virginia, they've been kind of shut out. Everybody's been shut out for 2 years. But JT Daniels, maybe that will give them a first-round pick next year if he can have a really solid season. So there's one for the Big 12 potentially, depending on what the quarterback group looks like and the type of year that he has. But that should, give him a chance at least. Like I said, Iowa State with Will McDonald. I'm not sure exactly how he's viewed, but he's a name that comes to mind. And yeah, I'm kind of blanking elsewhere. There's just a lot of good players, not a lot of great NFL-style players, and that's part of the problem. That's part of also why they're not winning playoff games and national championships.
You're just not thinking about.
No, well, I'm not thinking about offensive linemen off the top of my head. I'll be honest about it. I'm just thinking of just names in general. But yeah, I'm sure there's like an Oklahoma State offensive lineman that I'm not thinking of that could be a first rounder or something. But I do think this goes to show you, why are they not winning playoff games? Why are they not even getting to the playoffs in some cases? There is that talent gap. And who are the teams that got all those picks last night? Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia. Clemson was noticeably absent, which was kind of strange. But, normally they would be right there in the thick of things.
I'm looking at West Virginia. Their last first-round pick was Carl Joseph, defensive back by the Raiders in 2016. The year before, they had Kevin White, wide receiver. Tavon Austin in 2013. They had 2012 Bruce Irvin, who went to Seattle. So they had a run 3 or 4 years back when the early shootouts with those games with Baylor and even before then as well.